Andrew Lynch is a member also of the Planet Youth Steering Committee, and he is going to share with us some perspectives that he took from the education data. So Andrew, please.
Well, thank you, Kevin. And as I was looking at those last slides, I was thinking, I am happy today. I woke up happy because I got more than 8 hours sleep. I'm not happy when I get much less than 8 hours sleep. And that resonated with me. Just so you have a bit of an idea of why I'm here, I was a teacher and school principal for around 35 years. After retiring and moving to Lanark County, I became involved with Lanark County Community Justice and facilitating cases that had come to us through a court diversion program, using restorative justice as a model for resolving conflict. And I also ended up working in schools, introducing restorative practices to some of the area high schools and elementary schools. I still spend quite a bit of time in Ottawa schools as a substitute principal. All to say, I am still really passionate about kids, about youth, about their potential, and exploring ways in which we can help them be their very best. And of course, I'm constantly faced with kids who are struggling to be their best. So I thought I'd begin with just a bit of a context, because I'm always looking through data and information about education through a filter. So I'm sort of inviting you to consider some of these aspects. In any school environment, any learning environment, if we're going to create a really healthy learning culture, safety is paramount. Safety of feeling and being safe. So the safety of kids, how they're feeling about their environment, staff, people who walk into the school. That relationship between well-being, performance, and excellence. And by excellence, I mean being your best and knowing what it takes to be your best. What is it we do? What is it we foster or create in a school environment that helps people internalize what that means and the steps they can take? Relationships. If I were to focus on one thing other than safety, it likely would be about relationships. Relationships between students and staff, between staff, students, and parents. In other words, all the stakeholders in a school community. Oftentimes when I'm with youth, especially youth who might be struggling, I sort of wonder, I think about an infant, I think about this person in front of me, and I wonder, how is it we got from that curious mindset and that state of wonder that young children are in sometimes to a very different place when kids are struggling? So what is it we do, or what is it we can do to foster that, and what evidence is there in a school culture that exists? We often talk about risk-taking in education. We say, Johnny needs to take risks. Well, what do we do or how do we create a safe space or opportunities for people to take risks and feel they can experience failure, success, and learn that progress isn't linear. Any of us who've either observed kids learning to walk and what that takes, and of course the multiple failures that are part of that experience. But there's always that element of risk-taking. I'm going to get there. And the other piece that I won't be addressing through the data is the pedagogy and curriculum one, but it's always a part of the picture. So I thought I'd put it there. And there's a great statement that an acquaintance of mine came up with in a conversation several years ago. He talked about knowing your stuff and knowing who you're stuffing in relation to pedagogy and curriculum. And I would also add, know why we teach that stuff. As you look at some of the report data that I'm going to be showing you, I'm not going to be providing you with a lot of answers. You may look at some of that data and light bulbs may go off. You may well find yourself asking questions. And I'd say that's the first step when we look at data is, what are some of the questions that emerge? And of course, I'm certainly inclined to do this, and I think a lot of people are. Sometimes you look at data and invite speculation. You start wondering about relationships between data points. So this first slide gives you a bit of an overview of some of the highlights of school findings. Now, all of the area high schools and both boards have received school-specific reports. I don't have access to those. The data that we're looking at is the publicly available data from the surveys. And as Kevin mentioned, this was provided to us by grade 10 students freely, I think. I wasn't present for the actual survey. But some interesting things may start to emerge. As you look at the data, I'm not going to read it out to you, but when you look at it, what starts to pique your curiosity? Are there questions that start to emerge? One of the ones that I looked at and I thought, even when I'm with kids and somebody says, I'm feeling bad, I wonder, well, what does that mean? And so when I looked at that bit of data, I thought, okay, what is feeling bad mean? What are the contexts? These are the kinds of questions that start to emerge. What contributes to feeling safe at school? Well, I'm going to dig into that one a little more later on. And how do negative feelings about my response to those feelings? So I've got feelings, I'm going to respond in some way, but how does my response have an impact on my learning? And that's one of the reasons we sort of start exploring this is giving us some cues or clues. And it is through engagement with youth that we'll be able to start getting some of those answers. This data slide is similar to the previous one. It gives a little more information. And a reminder, all of this and more is available through the survey findings on our website. So if you want time with the data and start exploring it, that's one source you can go to. When I first saw the data, I found a lot of it interesting, but this is the one that really jumped out at me. When I see 67% of students saying they feel safe at school, I say, well, okay, that's good. But what about those 33% that aren't reporting that they're feeling safe at school? And what is that telling us about our learning environments? I don't have an answer. I could speculate, but I don't really have time or the luxury of doing that. But it's that kind of data that starts to prompt questions that we need to consider. And it's not about just a blame thing. There are a whole bunch of factors that contribute to a person's feeling of safety. It could be a reflection of personal resilience. It may be that there's something happening at the school or something in the physical layout of a school. I don't know, but it certainly bears exploring. And again, how do I, if I'm feeling unsafe, how do I cope with that? Do I cope by withdrawing? Do I cope by turning to substance? Do I fall in with a bad group? There are all kinds of ways people cope with feeling unsafe. But as an educator, ultimately, I also wonder, how is it affecting the students' learning? In this, at one moment, I'm actually going to step off of here, I think. So this next slide, you'll see, I don't know if you can read it, so I will just read this. Proportion of adolescents that agree or strongly agree with the following statements. I have friends at school that care about me. My friends think we should try our best at school. The students at my school are nice to each other. At my school, it is not a big deal to make mistakes while trying your best. Oops. There we go. So these are very much statements that have to do with the extent to which a student feels a part of their school community and feels supported in their school community. And I'm just flipping through things here a bit. Yep. And the question, one of the questions that I sort of wonder about as I look at something like that, for the students that don't feel a sense of belonging, how do they cope with their isolation? And once again, is that sense of isolation undermining their learning and also leading them to try ways of escaping that are unhealthy? Similarly, these statements have to do with the extent to which a student feels engaged in their school community. My school helps me achieve goals that matter to me. I try my best at school. At least one thing I do at school makes me want to be the best I can be. That's something I'm really big on, is instilling in students a feeling of confidence and an understanding of what they can do to be their very best. I have a good time participating in school activities. My school helps me discover things I'm good at doing. Doing my best at school now will help me to have a good life when I'm older. Interestingly enough, that had the highest percentage of positive responses. To what extent or how do I feel engaged in my school community and supported as a learner? So support as a learner is one of those key indicators that is either explicitly or implicitly reflected in the data. And I'm going to sort of turn full circle back to something that's come up a number of times this evening, because schools are not silos. They're very much a part of a community. Think of them as a hub, and there's a lot schools can do. I think it's really important that over the course of the evolution of Planet Youth, it would be wonderful to see more explicit cooperation and collaboration among all of these different elements, so that we're working together and exploring ways in which we can really enhance the lives of youth, but also, this is the educator in me, the learning outcomes for youth. So I'm going to leave it at that, except I will leave with a final thought. What are the benefits to a community, societal and economic, of student engagement, and what are the costs of disengagement? And Planet Youth offers us a process by which we can explore ways of engaging youth. And speaking of engaging youth, I'm going to turn the mic over to Rebecca Shams, who's going to talk about that very subject.